Hey everyone, Colin here. We're running a short survey to get better information on who listens to the show, and we're giving away free block space gear if you fill it out. If you find value in our shows or listen consistently, you can do me a huge favor and fill out the form. It takes about 30 seconds and helps me and the block space team keep the show running. You can find a link to the survey in the show notes. Thanks.
Okay, guys, today we have on Carl Dong, who I came across him actually in a little bit of a roundabout way, which was that I stumbled across his product, which is called Obscura. It's a VPN, and I think it's a very good one. And a lot of us like to use VPNs for various things in crypto and Bitcoin. And so I came across this and I started using it. I was like, this one is very good. And then I did a little more research, found the founder, and now, lucky for us today, we are able to have a conversation with him. Side note, I would just give a little bit more.
Lucky to be on too.
Yeah. And also, by the way, Carl has a storied career in Bitcoin development, short but very prominent. So welcome, Carl, if you want to introduce yourself. And yeah, maybe a background, wherever you want to start.
Thanks for the intro. Yeah, I'm Carl. I'm currently the founder of Obscura VPN. We're the first VPN that can't log your activity, and we outsmart internet censorship, whether it be in a nation state or whether it be a hotel or an airport and things like that. So yeah, very happy to be on. I was a Bitcoin developer for 3.5 years before that, working on I think perhaps the theme that traces through everything that I do is user trust, right? With Bitcoin Core, I was working on a core piece of reproducible builds, which has to do with user trust, as in, okay, you have this code base that's on GitHub, right? And then you're not stealing my coins. How do I make sure that what I download corresponds to this code base? So user trust in that way. And with Obscura, it's also about user trust in that, how can we sort of elevate the trust model of what a VPN is? Where, today, traditional VPNs, they know who you are. They have all your credit card information, all your address and whatever. And they also know what websites you're going on, like, wikifeet.com or, whatever have you, or whatever you DeFi degens do. And, thinking about, okay, can we make a better version of VPN where, no single party has access to both pieces of the information and can correlate them? And so that's what I'm about.
Okay. Let's go back then, just because I don't have a whole lot of context. Let's go back to like your initial background. What got you into Bitcoin originally, or before that, wherever you want to start. But yeah, just give a little bit of overview of your life and what led you here.
Yeah. I'm happy to. So I grew up in Shanghai for a bit, and then I was in London for primary school, where I got exposed to, the YouTubes and the Facebooks and all those things, and Wikipedia, important for book reports, let's say. Came back to Shanghai, and I just lost access to all of it. It was just when the Great Firewall was coming up. And so that was a huge deal for me because, I couldn't talk to my friends who were in London and things like that. So back then, there were a few commercial options available. So I tried those, and then I built my own for friends and family. And it worked okay, but, inevitably they would fall over, or, they wouldn't learn new tricks and they would get blocked by the Chinese firewall. And so I've always been interested in that. And, sort of it harkens to why I'm doing what I'm doing now. When I came to the U.S. for a high school, that's when I started sort of getting into a Bitcoin. I think it was one of my teachers mentioned the Slashdot article, and then I looked it up. I was like, "Holy, what is this?" And I remember setting up a GPU mine in my dorm room at my high school, and annoying the heck out of my roommate, that's for sure. But it kept us warm during the winter, let's say.
Yeah.
But I think back then it was because I only had GPUs. So the most profitable thing to mine was the script algorithm. So that would be Dogecoin back then. And I had an auto sell put together where I, get the Dogecoin, get Bitcoin. Those coins, unfortunately, are long lost. But it was a good start to something else, let's say. And eventually I ended up for my last year at Berkeley, I just sort of decided to move to San Francisco because I was like, I could just go back and Uber back and take the tests. And I ended up at Blockstream, where at the time, I think this was right after the block size wars, which, I was not really participating in any meaningful way, but just sort of like watching from afar with popcorn. But I decided, hey, Blockstream seems like they've got really smart guys. And so I joined them, worked on some liquid functionary stuff, and then went to Chaincode, which is where I was working on Bitcoin Core for 3.5 years. I think all my experience growing up as a kid made me really value freedom, and in particular digital freedom. I feel like the digital space is sort of like a new frontier in which we can still sort of preserve our God-given rights, let's say, and it's being corroded in certain ways. And I think it's an honor. It's really our duty as technologists and people who understand cryptography, who can code up these things, to use our tools to sort of expand the freedom of humans in the digital space. Yeah, that's where we are.
Oh, that's okay. That was great. So I'm going to try to follow some of that a little bit chronologically. When you joined Blockstream, this is actually a bit of an adjacent question, but I'm kind of curious because I'm not sure if I've had anybody on who's worked at Blockstream and then Chaincode. I mean, probably the two, I would say, most respected kind of Bitcoin development companies, and then sort of open source, communities. Yeah. When you're at Blockstream, when you were hired, you said you were working on some like sort of downloading the, Bitcoin Core and being able to convey to users that they were truly downloading, the real, from like the initial block download or whatever, like this was the trust model,
Blockstream, right? Well, at Blockstream, I was mostly working on the Liquid Federation network. Oh, okay. Yeah, exactly. But Chaincode was more of the Bitcoin Core work was done at Chaincode. Yeah.
Okay, so at Blockstream, you're working on mainly Liquid stuff. Was any of that open source protocol development, or was that more like product based initially? I don't know how you would distinguish it.
That was more. I can tell an interesting story about sort of my time at Blockstream. So when I senior year at Berkeley, I was like, God, this Blockstream company seems cool. I got to get in however I can, right? And I was like, okay, I probably can't get in through the front door because like their engineers are just all like PhDs, all these magicians, these wizards, let's say, right, at the time. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go work for their IT department. And so I applied for the IT department and got in through their IT department and did a lot of security work. And I think a few members of the engineering team saw what I was doing and sort of just like pulled me into engineering. And that's where I deployed most of the Liquid network, actually. So Liquid is sort of like a network of functionaries of like, independent companies participating. They all need to run the node software on hardware. And so I was the intern that like picked up all the physical servers, put them on a floor. I remember that night very clearly. And of course, we have to do one better. We cleaned the Intel management engine off the BIOSes and flashed them onto the servers. So I had to like clip each individual chip and flash them on there, and then install the operating system. And for a lot of the companies, I physically brought these machines to them to install on site. And so that was what I was doing.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
And it was a fun time. Let's say. But most of the Bitcoin Core work was done at Chaincode. So I'll explain a little bit about sort of what my main project was. My main project was improving our reproducible build system, right? So the way you think about it is this, right? When you run Bitcoin Core, let's say you download maybe on Mac a disk image or on Windows like a exe or something like that. You download it from our website. Maybe you check the SHA-256 hash sum, but some people are just lazy. I'm lazy sometimes too. And so you double click it and you open it, right? What the hell are you running? Right?
Yeah.
Like, couldn't this just be like a piece of software that the Bitcoin Core developers put up there to like steal your coins, or worse, like transmit it to them and then steal it later when you have more? Like, what are you like? How do we establish that chain of trust of like, okay, this is open source software, right? So supposedly it's on GitHub. How do we make sure that what I'm downloading is the thing that's on GitHub? Because the code that's on GitHub, you can scrutinize it. You can look at like, is it actually extracting my coins and all of those things? And so that's what I worked on is this chain of trust. And I think this is actually in sort of the cybersecurity realm, this has become way more prominent in the past few years, because what attackers have realized is that these kind of what we call supply chain attacks, these kind of supply chain attacks are really easy to pull off. Because you don't need to like find a vulnerability in this well-reviewed code base or whatever. You just need to make sure people are downloading the wrong thing and you're done. Yeah. Right. So that means if the IT admin at wherever they release the software, as long as you get them, you've got everybody. And so what I worked on was, we had a reproducible build system, but that reproducible build system was really hard. By the way, this whole effort is called reproducible builds. And this is sort of an effort across the broader software space where, Linux operating systems are doing it. And, anything that's security critical is trying to do it. So we had a reproducible build system that was fine, but didn't work as well because one of the Ken Thompson, which is one of the really famous programmer, C and Unix fame, let's say, he presented on this idea of the trusting trust attack. And what the trusting trust attack is, so how do I explain this in an easy way? So how like to make yogurt, like you need like some milk and some yogurt, right? You need like to make yogurt, you need some yogurt, right? And that's how software is. To make software, you need like some software. You need some software and a compiler. What we call a compiler. That's what makes the code on the GitHub into what we run, right? But to make a compiler, you need another compiler, and to make a compiler, you need another compiler, right? And so it goes all the way down. So what Ken Thompson was saying was that if you infect one of the compilers, let's say like 10 years ago, the frickin' NSA put like a bug into one of the compilers that's shipped with everything, you can actually have a hidden bug that propagates through everything, even if the code for the new compilers are all good. So that was a pretty alarming thing, especially if you're trying to like become like the security model of like global decentralized money is very different from like an app that you download, right?
Right.
And so what we were able to do was to have a full chain of record of even the compilers down to like this small app that is like zeros and ones written by a hand, that like doesn't like it is the yeast basically that made the first yogurt, basically in that analogy. So that was the work that was done. It's been used for all Bitcoin releases for the past few years. I don't know of anybody else, any other project that's done supply chain security to this degree. And there's actually a bug in the Tor browser bug tracker that's like, hey, take a look at this and let's try to do this as well. And so that's the main thing that I did. One thing that I started before I went off to do my own thing was Lit Bitcoin kernel. And so that's become a big project in Bitcoin Core world. And this goes into a little bit of interesting history, I think, about sort of the dynamics of the Bitcoin Core organization. I think my personal read, and I could be mistaken here, is that the block size wars and some of the close encounters with hard forks that were sort of before and after then really gave the maintainers and the contributors to Bitcoin Core PTSD, because we're operating on a trust model and sort of on a security model where we can't be Vitalik and be like, stop trading, stop, this is the real chain now, right? Like if we ever did that, like Bitcoin is gone, right? Like Bitcoin would not be what it is today. And so when we have these brushes against, we might have introduced an inflation bug, we might have like hard forked the network and things like that, that makes the organization very, very very scared. And so that's why sort of Bitcoin Core has always been of the mindset of, most people should just run Bitcoin Core, because consensus is basically guaranteed to converge if it is the same implementation. If you have multiple implementations, consensus can diverge, and then you have these hard forks and things like that. Imagine a network where there's like 50% running Bitcoin Core, 50% running something else. That would be what happens. Right. Exactly. Well, topical. So one of the things that it goes back to like my thinking of like, can we have technical solutions to social problems, right? One of the things I was seeing was that in Bitcoin Core, we were getting all kinds of feature requests and new additions to, things that were sort of outside of the protocol. But if we were to pull it into the code base, we would have to maintain it as well, right? Code complexity sort of grows exponentially all the time. And we want to make sure that the software that we ship is good, right? We don't want like some bug in some auxiliary thing to affect the node or like crash it or whatever. So I wanted to enable sort of that experimentation, right? While allowing people to keep to the core consensus of Bitcoin Core, as in, not introduce a hard fork and everything else. And so that's where libbitcoin kernel was born. It's basically just a library, which is, you can think of just a lump of code that people can import in whatever language they want and whatever way they want, that will faithfully implement the Bitcoin Core consensus engine. And they can add on top of it whatever they want. The indexing, build, ordinals on top. Who cares, right? But that is code that, Bitcoin Core doesn't have to maintain anymore. And they can stick to consensus and not be hard forked off the network.
Yeah, I want to ask, like, this is just maybe for the audience, also for myself, but because we have somebody here from Chaincode. So I observe, some like Twitter banter sometimes, and there's been this long, I think people from outside of Bitcoin, but also people within Bitcoin at times like to say that, Blockstream controls Bitcoin and they have all the power, right? And ironically though, when I talk to some people who I think are closer to core developers and closer to the protocol, what they tell me is that in terms of who actually pulls the strings, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, but who actually pulls the strings, it's Chaincode. In terms of who are like the largest group of smart people working on the Bitcoin protocol, and who do you need to, I don't want to say like, I don't want to say something about, like power structures. That's not my domain. But what I hear is that the smartest people working on Bitcoin are actually at Chaincode. And those are the people that do a lot of the protocol development. And a lot of the protocol development sounds like what you were working on is stuff that 99% of people never hear about, right? We hear about, Opcat, CTV, all of these, ideas to change Bitcoin, but like the raw protocol work, like very simple packet relay stuff and the stuff that you're working on, like all of this stuff is done by people who are working, full time. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Chaincode is non-profit. Is that correct? It's like funded, or it's like funded with?
It's just privately funded.
Okay.
I mean, there's no revenue source. Let's say.
Right. Exactly.
That's really what it is. I think, you're correct in saying that. I think at times Chaincode has had a large number of well-respected contributors to the project and maintainers and so on. At times it's been Brink, it's dynamics that shift all over, right? At times, there are people at the MIT DCI and things like that. It's contributing from whatever. I would say I can speak to only sort of my personal opinion is that I was just able to work on whatever the heck I wanted to, let's say, that would better and improve Bitcoin. There wasn't any top down whatsoever. The way I describe Bitcoin Core is, I think most people misunderstand how, they try to see a power structure where there is just rough consensus and people disagreeing with each other and agreeing with each other. The way I think about Bitcoin Core devs, it's just like a merry band of developers. It's just a loose collection of people, and sometimes the same people agree on stuff. Sometimes the people in the same company disagree on stuff. Perhaps you see less with the same sponsors. Perhaps you see less of those on the internet because they usually have lunch and sort of hash it out and try to understand each other much quicker instead of go online and rant about it. But I think that's sort of mostly how it works. And I think to your point about sort of people like the publicity of it all, the being, people talking about Obcat and UpCTV and all those things of it all. My personal thinking is that Bitcoin Core is sort of this lab experiment that leaked out into the real world. And obviously it was going to leak out into the real world because, it's a great project and but it leaked out more than other lab projects like the internet did, let's say, because there is money to be made and it just went straight up and down. It should have stayed in the lab a little while longer is my point of view, right? And so I think for Bitcoin Core developers, that's mostly what they think about when they think about sort of improvements, right? We want to make improvements to Bitcoin. We're not, because if you put it out there, then there are people for it, there are people against it. There's going to be all kinds of arguments about it from people who are don't have the full context that we all do. And haven't worked on it for years and haven't tried to socialize all of it. And so that's how we work on projects and things like that. But I mean, we give our talks at conferences. Maybe they're a little dry, but I tried to make a video each time I had a major project. So perhaps that helps.
The Gwart Show is sponsored by Ellipsis Labs, who I've been following for 3 years now. They're one of the strongest teams I know in crypto. Ellipsis Labs is a small engineering team with a flat structure. They build complex systems, primarily in Rust. For engineers who like challenges, here's the kind of problem they solve. A layer 2 blockchain needs to maintain 100 million accounts and generate a state root after each transaction batch. The root must be built within 50 milliseconds. How would you design a system to ensure the root construction is fast enough? High-performance challenges are core to Ellipsis Labs' mission as they build modern crypto finance. They believe finance needs more than an upgrade. It needs a complete rewrite. The success of their first product, Phoenix V1, speaks for itself, doing over $70 billion in organic trading volume. Now, Ellipsis Labs is building Atlas, the blockchain purpose-built for verifiable finance. I know this team personally, and I like them because they're unique in the crypto space. They have a long-term focus, they work in person from their New York City headquarters, and they're here to build products that fundamentally change the world of finance. If you want to learn more about their open roles, go to ellipsislabs.xyz/careers. What is your general view about funding for open source protocol work, specifically with Bitcoin? Where do you think we're at? I think that you got to follow the incentives, right? With all of this stuff. Yeah. And there's private, funded organizations like Chaincode. There's private companies that are, shipping products like Blockstream, but they also have a lot of people working obviously on the protocol itself. And then you have various random developers who are living in the middle of nowhere and contributing their time. How do you feel about the state of funding? I know this isn't what you do now. Obviously, we're going to move on to that, but just, your overarching view, is there enough money going into keeping this thing running the way it should be? Or is there too much, number go up without just hammering out the little nitty gritty stuff like you did?
It's tough to say because, I think with any security focused product, well, this is not really a product, a project. This is civilization tech. With civilization tech, let's say, and with any kind of project, there is the needle you need to move forward to be more featureful, and the needle you need to move forward to be more robust, let's say. And I think people love the new features, right? People love OpCTV, OpCat and things like that, right? And that's fair. I mean, that's what gets the people going, right? But there's always, the needle that you need to move forward in order to be more robust as well, because especially in civilizational tech, because if it's not robust, like the whole market can go kaput in a day, right? Like if there was like an actual inflation bug that's found and exploited and we can't find a good way, that is like catastrophic, let's say, right? And so I think as maintainers, the responsibility is to make sure that doesn't happen. We'd rather that doesn't happen if it means a feature is like a month or two late. I will say with regards to the funding sources and things like that, I think that and it's been a while since I've been in this, but I think the current funding situation is okay. There's always need, let's say, for more funding in terms of, it would always be good to get more people in and to train more people so that we can work on more projects. But I will say that, it's not a more is better kind of thing. I think two things that are sort of nuances. One is you want them to be well distributed, right? You don't want like one guy contributing, $1 billion a year, right? Because like, what if they die?
Right. Well, that's also, I was just gonna like interject for a second and say that's often this kind of double-edged sword where you see people like, I'm giving an extreme example here of a Twitter screeching, right? Of, well, Michael Saylor, he doesn't contribute anything to, open source development. And then, okay, let's say he does. Now you have people screeching, Michael Saylor's influencing the protocol. He's going to push this the direction that he wants. He's going to make, you know what I mean? So you always are going to have this push and pull where do you want the money coming from? And it's kind of balance. Like, yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, I don't have, anything revelatory thoughts on this, but you having actually, been in the weeds, at least for some period of time, like I am interested just if you have any thoughts on that. It's like, well, there's always going to be people yelling one way or another, and you want to try to maintain some balance, right?
Yeah. I mean, the peanut gallery is never going to be happy with whatever you do, right? That's just how life is. I think for organizations and for people who are not yet contributing even some is good. Let's say. Right? Because, I'm not saying like take over the entire, contribution process, but contributing some is good. But I think the reason why I think it's in a good shape is sort of throughout Bitcoin Core history, or at least since I've joined, there's always been 3 or 4 major organizations that people could go to for funding and to sort of be part of a community and things like that. And that's all the way through to now. I think that's an okay shape for funding to take. And I think that's okay going forward. And I hope that we maintain that and not sort of collapse down to one. I think that's when you would be very worried. But the other point I wanted to make is also that because Bitcoin Core is such a security sensitive code base written in a language C++, where it's so easy to get something wrong that nobody sees. It's not the more people submitting random patches, the better. We really want people who sort of understand the code base, understand why we do things the way that we do, prior art. And I'm not saying that like the way we've done things is perfect, but it's sort of like you gotta, what's it called? Chesterton's fence it, right? Like you gotta understand why we're doing what we're doing currently to be like, oh, but here's a better way, right? And so it's a fine balance between we want more people, but like we want good people, let's say. That was my view at the time, not trying to speak for anybody else.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. We'll come back to some more Bitcoin stuff. But okay, you leave Chaincode to found Obscura.
Right. Yeah.
Give me the elevator pitch and then I'll start probing. Oh, I'll give another slight shill. I'm not an investor or anything. I just like supporting, projects that I've personally used and be like, oh, it's pretty good. Like I said, I kind of stumbled to Obscura in a roundabout way. I started using it. I was like, okay, this one is good. This is a good VPN. I've used a ton of VPNs. I'm not going to tell everybody why, but you can certainly guess, like, we're all using VPNs, right? And I found Obscura to be very, very good. So that's obviously the impetus for this conversation. And it's just so convenient that I also get to ask you about Bitcoin stuff. But so that's the context. Give me the elevator pitch. Why did you want to launch a VPN? Why did you break away from Bitcoin development to do so?
Yeah, I could give you the story, let's say.
Yeah, let's hear it.
When I was, after Chaincode, I was, taking a little break and looking around at things to do. And obviously, I'm a big privacy tech guy, and I'm a big user trust guy. And so I looked around at like, where can I make the most impact? And I thought back to, hey, I was in Shanghai working on VPNs, and I remember WireGuard being launched. And, I was still using VPNs at the time, when I left Chaincode. And I was like, like these existing players, they seem a little sketchy now. Like they are trying to inundate all of our YouTubes with the ads. They're not really focusing on the core tech. But I think that the thing that radicalized me was like WireGuard, which is this VPN protocol that was like, upon release, everybody was like, this is the future. Like, this is what VPNs will be about. It took them like 3 to 4 years to implement this. So I was like, okay, I feel like they've gotten a little enshittified, a little too corporate-y. And so I took a deeper look at the industry, and I took a deeper look at the tech. And that's when one of my good friends, Matt Corallo, he was he told me he was like, hey, you should look into Apple iCloud Relay. And I didn't expect, I knew that Apple had this branding of privacy and whatever, right? But I didn't expect sort of like fundamental good tech to come out from sort of their research. But I read through it, and it was a great, like, it blew my mind. I was just like, and they're like, they invented this whole new scheme. It's multi-party relays, which is, and two-party relays. They invented this whole scheme, and it was only for Safari. I was like, are you serious? Like, we should just bring this to the masses is really what we should do. And it was in this ingenious scheme. The fundamental problem with traditional VPNs is that they say, protect your privacy from your ISP or coffee shop or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But what you've done is basically, instead of your ISP seeing what you're doing and where you're coming from and everything else, you've now shifted this model to like this privately owned, unaccountable company that knows your full address and
like
all
Latvia
those things.
Or something.
right, exactly. Lithuania is the hub.
Yeah. Okay, Lithuania.
Lithuania is the hub, and I'm like, that does not seem like the right trade-off to make, and especially as someone who's sort of coming from the Bitcoin world, like my bar for privacy and my bar for improving a product is so much higher, right? And so what the Apple iCloud Relay paper was an answer to this trust model problem, right? The problem is that these VPN companies know who you are and know where you're going. So they basically have your full internet, browsing history then. Mostly just a domain name, but to a first approximation, yes. And so what Apple did was they just split it up. So instead of you visiting the VPN server, which goes to Wikifeed, it's you going to Apple servers, going to Cloudflare servers, which goes to Wikifeed. And so the first hop, let's say, knows who you are, but has no idea where you're going. And the second hop doesn't know who you are. It just knows one of 1,000 people from the first hop is visiting and is going to the end. And that's exactly what we've replicated with Obscura. So with Obscura, we are the first hop, and Molvad VPN, which we think is the most trustworthy traditional VPN out there, is the second hop. So we know who you are and that you've paid and everything else, but we can't see any of your packets. There's no metadata for us to see. It's just a random stream byte to us. And we just relay it, untransformed to Molvad. And Molvad sees it's one of 100, one of 1,000, Obscura users on this server and serves you up that information. And so in that way, no single person knows who you are and what you're visiting at the same time. And that's just a much better security model than shifting trust to a privately owned company. In like a sentence, it's like, gun to our head, expose your internet history, we would be shot dead, basically, because we literally just don't have it.
Interesting. Okay. You mentioned Tor. What do you think about Tor? Like, what is the state of Tor? You hear conspiracy theorists saying it's like just a massive honeypot, and I'm not technical enough to say if that's true or not. So I'm kind of curious. Tor seems like it's been a useful tool for quite a long time. And talk maybe if you could distinguish a little bit also for people like me, like when would I want to use Tor versus when do I want to use Obscura? When do I want to use both at the same time, for example? Like what are scenarios? Yeah, like what are scenarios like that for privacy focus?
Yeah, I think immense respect for the Tor project. I think if you got dollars to spare, donate to the Tor project. They do some good work. But to me, I'm a convenience snob sometimes, and I want things that are convenient and easy to use. And Tor, unfortunately, is not one of those, which is why like every product has trade-offs, right? Their trade-off is we are the most private that we can be, but a lot of sites don't work. It's going to be slow as heck, and good luck trying to stream a video through there, right? And that's mostly because the way they do their privacy is because anybody can participate and be a node in the network, right? Like free participation that gives you more privacy because it's not like the NSA is running all the nodes, right? Well, maybe they are, but who knows? But like in theory, it's free participation. But what that means is like some of these Tor nodes are just like some guy's computer somewhere. Where like he's not really maintaining it, and he probably doesn't have good uplink, so like it's just going to be really slow. And like if you think about it, like Tor does like a bunch of hops, right? It's like if one of them is bad,
one is
entire
slow.
Experience is it's one is slow, your entire experience is ruined, right? So that sort of wouldn't do for me, and like for me, like I can only work on a product that I would use every day and have on 24/7. And like we're talking through Obscura right now. And this is what I've done for like all my calls, all of my YouTube 4K HDR streaming and everything. And that's because like we have hyper optimized for performance in our client software, in our server software. And we have like 2 dedicated hops, right? Our servers are bare metal, beefy servers with good uplink, and Obscura and Molvat servers are good ones as well. It's going to be these 2 hops by 2 reliable operators. There's not going to be anything that's going to stand in the way. And so that's where, so, in short, if you want maximum privacy and don't really care about usability, use Tor, and perhaps just use Tor occasionally. And
I feel like you kind of. I've run Tor before.
Yeah.
I'm not technical enough to figure out why. Maybe I'm just annoyed because it is super slow, but I found like Tor to be very annoying, and I just, started using VPNs, right? Like this is my trajectory. Like I feel like you kind of need to be a little bit technical to understand what's going on with Tor, and I am not. So I was like, all right, like I'm like you, convenience factor just outweighs so much, right?
100%. Yeah, the convenience factor outweighs everything, and that's why I built Obscura. I was like, we need to do better than the traditional VPNs for sure, but it's also got to be convenient. And there just wasn't anything that was sitting in the middle that I liked, and so I built it.
Hey, Will here with Blockspace Media. Did you know that we have individual feeds for all our shows? If you're watching the Mining Pod, Bitcoin Season 2, or the Gwart Show, be sure to check out the individual feeds. You can find them on your podcast player of choice, whether that be Spotify, Apple, YouTube, etc. Just type in Blockspace Media and you'll find all our shows pop up, or just type in the individual show name like the Mining Pod or Bitcoin Season 2. Be sure to hit that subscribe and give us a 5-star rating so we can continue to bring you the best content in Bitcoin.
What percentage of Americans use VPNs like daily when they're browsing? Like 3%? I mean, it's got to be extremely low, right?
Yeah, I don't know the daily numbers, but you can sort of guesstimate from the numbers that Nord pulls, and some of these are sort of public in their reports. I think Nord has about 15 million users worldwide. And so that if you make the estimates, that's like $1 billion a year industry, right? Well, not an industry, like Nord themselves is like $1 billion a year in revenue.
Yeah.
And so if we want to talk industry and talk shop about this, right? I think what's happened
to the extent
is,
you're willing to discose, like I'm not asking for,
of course.
Yeah. But just I'm curious about this, right?
As long as it's interesting, for anybody can make this calculation quite easily, right? For VPN companies, the profit margin is quite large in terms of because bandwidth is a cost that decreases over time, and so this is why we've seen their marketing budgets. I mean, everybody's seen the effects of their marketing budgets, right? You can't escape a Nord or Surfshark or ExpressVPN sponsorship if you're a podcaster or a YouTuber or anything like that. And that's where they've gone. And I think for the past 10 years, that was probably the right thing to do. That was the smart thing to do, right? When you have a product that a lot of people want and people should be using, and just not enough people are using it, why focus on the fundamental tech of it all? Just pull something off the shelf and just blast out that marketing budget. Exactly. But I think what we're seeing now is that, like, the holes are starting to show, let's say, in their engineering department. I feel like these companies are big marketing departments with a little tiny engineering contingent on top of it. The holes are starting to show in that, like, you go to airports or coffee shops. I mean, this is not like in any like censorious nation state. You go to any of these places and you like try to connect, and it's like, it won't connect. Why? Because Cisco's advanced protection thing that they sold to China is now at your local coffee shop, and some IT admin was like, what is this? Let me turn this on. And that's it, right? And so we have things like this. We have the fact that they're not actually offering real privacy, and a lot of them don't even have their source code open, so God knows what they're doing with their data. All these things together, I think and with the new innovations that are coming from Apple iCloud Relay, we're at a turning point now for the new generation of VPN companies. This is sort of my thesis for, like, okay, I'm going to go full all in on this, and this is what I'm going to do. And I'm very happy that we were able to make it happen. Yeah.
I am happy to bring the shill. Like, again, one thing that's kind of funny is, like, with, I'm a bit of a G-gen, and I play with all sorts of crypto nonsense. And it's funny, you kind of, I'm not sure I'm going to articulate this very well, but there's things that are not very costly, like a VPN, that I think provide a very high amount of utility. And there are things that are comparatively costly. It's not exactly the same type of cost structure, but maybe a better way to say this is like there are a lot of things that are very useless that make a lot of money. And I'm always, I'm interested with something like a VPN. Like this is a very useful technology, and you want to see good products do well, right? Instead of marketing fluff and stuff like that. So I'm interested, like, a little bit from the business sense, but I think what you said makes a lot of sense. Like you're seeing the kind of the crack show with a lot of these are wrappers of, existing VPN architecture, and they just put massive marketing into it. And, that will, as we're seeing, they're being effectively censored already, Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, well, I guess the next thing I was going to ask, just this is more of a broad question, but like, what do you think are really, easy but impactful privacy, self-sovereign things that people can do that are, not having to run Tor, but simple.
Well,
like
I would say sign up for Obscura VPN, obviously.
Okay, so we got that one. Yeah. Like, just give us some hot takes you have about what people should do, or stuff that is like perhaps presented as being an extremely valuable unlock, and in reality, it's like very marginal. Signal's good.
I think Signal is great. So here's an interesting point I want to make about sort of the privacy tech industry is that I feel like for very long now, a lot of privacy tech products have distilled it, like put it in consumers' heads that like, oh, if it's a privacy product, it must be hard to use, right? There's sort of like false dichotomy between the two. And I think we're starting to see companies now where it's like, oh, it could be the more private alternative, but it could also be as usable as the one that you were using before. And I think Signal is a great, a great one at that. I think Telegrams do the animations better. They've got some really cracked Eastern European, engineers out there doing things like that. But, I think one thing that everybody has to know is that Telegram is not end-to-end encrypted unless you do the actual secret chat. I think that's been made abundantly clear now, but I hope anybody who doesn't know that should know that. As informed consumers and things like that, I would say just try to look for the end-to-end encrypted alternative to whatever you have, but don't be a stickler about it, right? Like I'm like, I want the end-to-end encrypted alternative, but like the usability has to be there for me, because otherwise I'm just not going to use it, which is like, all the worst. And I think there's been a couple of things that are good for that. I think people should really be using a password manager. I think that like I've been surprised at a number of people that like know about password managers but don't use them. But using a password manager, I think, is very basic steps for individual security and privacy and things like that.
And then what about, maybe linking this back into Bitcoin a bit, what about financial privacy? Are there, what do you think is, from your 3-4 years of working on Bitcoin or being around Bitcoin development, what are your thoughts on maybe the state of privacy development with Bitcoin? And then, what are some useful tools there? Regarding Bitcoin specifically.
Yeah. Regarding Bitcoin specifically, I think it's a difficult, when we talk about improvements to Bitcoin, I think there's always this difficult conflict between when people who are outside of development talk about improvements to Bitcoin, they are afforded the luxury of thinking in, sort of blue, like, what if we could do this and what if we could do that and everything else, right? And when you're in Bitcoin development, you have to be like, okay, maybe that would be good, but like, what does that change? Does that change sort of our cryptographic assumptions? Like, how would we I mean, like just rolling out. I remember like when Taproot was fully implemented, there was like this whole debate of like, how do we roll this out? How do we roll it out such that all the nodes are, all the signaling and miner signaling and all those things. But I think, there are many projects out there that are very good. I think, silent payments. It's been a while since I've taken a look at it. Silent payments is really good. Sort of on-chain improvement to Bitcoin privacy. But I will say that to me, the thing that makes Bitcoin private enough, privacy friendly, let's say, but still usable is Lightning. I think Lightning is one of those things where people who are not using it, I think there's always, every few months, there's Twitter discourse of like, nobody uses Lightning. Like, we accept Lightning. People use Lightning. We can see that we can see the proof every day. And what Lightning does from a privacy perspective is it becomes a big mixer. The entire
it's like a
network,
mini Tor, kind of.
Right, exactly. It's like a mini Tor. I mean, like they literally say onion routing. I mean, this is how sats are. They do onion routing. And my wife, who works on the Rust implementation of the Lightning network, she wrote up the sort of onion messaging, which is this new scheme for Lightning and everything else. I think, again, this comes back to Bitcoin was a lab experiment that escaped, right? Yeah. Ideally, we would have had, more time to work on Lightning before it escaped, and now we have all this consensus to work out and to agree upon the different implementations and all those things. But now with Lightning more widely deployed and in more wallets than ever, we're actually reaching a point where most of the gripes with Lightning that were present and very real, let's say, for the past few years, are getting solved on Bitcoin Core level in terms of, trucks and zero fee. It has to do with mempools and closing Lightning channels and whatever. All of these things are being solved now, and we're reaching a point where, Lightning payments could be almost as easy as a payment over Venmo. Don't quote me on that. There might be a little difference, but to the average human, there would not be any difference. And I think that's really good in that privacy and usability comes together. And I'll make a point about this. I think this was the OG, Andreas Antonopoulos made this point, and it's stuck in my head all these years. Is we want to make the easiest thing the most private thing as well. That's really, really important. Because if the easiest thing is not the most private thing, then, it's suspicious, right? Why are you doing the harder thing? Is there something you have to be private about? Are you trying to hide something? I think that, our company mission at Obscura is we want to make the internet private and open by default, right? Yeah. And the defaults really matter here in all of these privacy tech products and pieces of technology, and that the default should be private and the default should be usable.
Yeah, it was a very admirable goal. Okay, I want to finish up on, and I don't know how closely you follow us now. Obviously, you're actually building something in the real world, right? And you're not screeching with us on Twitter, but I want to ask, how closely you follow some of the discourse about upgrades, and maybe more specifically, are there any upgrades or changes to Bitcoin that you'd really like to see? Again, probably doesn't have much to do with Obscura, but just if you follow along, I guess. I didn't know your wife was working on Lightning, so it's a Bitcoin family, I guess. So you probably hear at least some of the gossip, right? Like, what do you think about the kind of current state of the protocol? In terms of upgrades or like additional features in the near future?
Yeah. Well, I think covenants are a long time coming, right? Even just in the very limited scope of doing vaults and everything else, I think there's big, there's proven demand for that, and I think people are reaching consensus now about how the form that it's going to take in terms of an upgrade and things like that. I think here's one thing that people don't talk about on Twitter that people should know. This was a project from back when I was at Blockstream, and today it's coming a little bit to fruition, which is Simplicity. Simplicity is this project by Russell O'Connor at Blockstream, and I've always thought it would be like a decade-long project, and it has proven to basically be a decade-long project of bringing scripting to a Bitcoin-like blockchain. So of course they're deploying it on Liquid and the Liquid Federation right now, but Simplicity is one where most of the stuff that you would want to do and can do with EVM, some of these more expressive scripting languages, you're able to express it in a way such that you can have provable properties about the script. The reason why, when Ethereum and EVM and all those things were going out and just sort of being like, we are Turing complete, you can do anything. This is the world computer and everything else. The reason why Bitcoin didn't go down that route is because you can't prove anything about these scripts because they're Turing complete, right? Like there's the halting problem, right? Like you literally cannot prove what these things are going to do. Simplicity is not Turing complete. You can prove what scripts, you can do analysis on these scripts. And it turns out you don't need Turing. I think Vitalik wrote a blog post about this. You don't need Turing completeness to do all of the things you want to do in a financial network on a crypto network. And so I'm sure it's another decade before it's ready to be deployed anywhere.
Yeah.
But
I think asking
super exciting.
I think asking the Bitcoin community to rally around Simplicity right now would be like, from what I can tell, and I do see conversations every so often. I think it's usually just along the lines of like, this is such a drastic. Now you may disagree with that, but I think the interpretation is that this would be such a drastic change to how Bitcoin functions. Yeah, that let's work with like a very restrictive covenant like CTV or something at first, and then down the road we can
100%, and it's going to take 10 years. We can't wait.
But you're bullish on
no, we can't wait, but like it's good to get something in the turn.
But you're like generally bullish on Simplicity, like as a general construct, is what I hear.
Yes, I'm bullish on it as a construct, and the reason why it's sort of top of mind for me now is because last month, I think, or 2 months ago, they released a language. Now they have a fully formed language, and they were able to implement OpCTV, OpCat, all of these things in Simplicity, which I think is a show of dominance, really, right? Like this is the model that encapsulate all of the things that you would want to do. But totally agree. It's another decade before we even come close to it being anywhere.
Yeah. Actually, you mentioned something that made me think of one last question. I'm curious if you have observed anything from the rest of crypto that you think has been novel or innovative or a breakthrough. And you can take this either in the direction of like privacy for Obscura or just for Bitcoin development. I think what I'm getting at here is, we've long said, well, let the innovation happen elsewhere, and what's useful we bring to Bitcoin. And a decent portion of the development elsewhere has been in privacy, not a ton, but some of it, right? ZK stuff, succinct proving, all this stuff. I'm curious, I don't come at this as from a deeply technical level that you do. Have you seen anything that built elsewhere, maybe in crypto, where you're like, oh, this is actually a massive unlock?
Unfortunately, I don't follow the rest of crypto that often. I will say that, as a nerd, I think some of the work that IPFS does is very interesting. The way they use Merkle DAGs and everything, I think there's only like a couple of dozen people in the world who the content addressable model is really good. And anyway, I could go on for days about that, but I think you're exactly right? Like, we let these other chains experiment. Not we let, but they do experiment.
Right.
And then what we find is good, we try to bring into Bitcoin. And I think one of the things is that there's an understanding that Bitcoin doesn't have to be everything. In fact, it's better if it's not everything. Anybody who's maintained big pieces of software understands that complexity grows exponentially. And with complexity grows bugs, right? And we really don't want... So things that we take are going to be things that are simple, that are easy to reason about, that are strict improvements over what we have right now. And I'm saying we, but at Bitcoin Core, I haven't been working on it for so long. So yeah.
Okay, well, this has been fantastic. We've hit on a lot of subjects. I'm happy that you were able to come on. It's a little bit different of a show than maybe I normally do, but it's like really quite fascinating for me. Where can people find you? On Twitter, and then if you want to show your I keep saying show, like I'm so used to saying it like condescendingly, but if you'd like to let people know about your product that I have used, I think is good. I'm not a show, but I'm just feel free to do so.
Yeah, 100%. Well, go to obscura.com, where the VPN that can't log, won't lag, and works anywhere. So
awesome.
Come join us. We have a Discord. This just what I'm talking through it right now. I think you'll really enjoy the VPN experience.
Awesome. And then on Twitter, where can people find you?
On Twitter, you can follow me at Carl_Dong. That's me.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much for coming on.
Cheers. Thanks.